What's a crazy statistic? You are more likely to be bitten by a stranger in New York City than by a shark anywhere else in the nation. You are more likely to be killed by a vending machine than by a shark. What we can learn from this is that strange vending machines in New York City should be avoided at all costs. More energy from the sun hits Earth every hour than the planet uses in a year. 1/3 of adults still sleep with a comfort object. Yep, sure do. I've got my teddy bear. My daughter made me a Build-A-Bear after her mom, my wife, passed away. I snuggle with that bear every night and will continue doing so with no end in sight. Sharks predate trees by 100 million years. Sharks also predate Saturn's rings. The top 10% of drinkers account 60% of all alcohol consumed in the US, and they drink the equivalent of 74 drinks per week. So the entire alcoholic beverages industry is kept alive by severe alcoholics. 600 billion pounds of shat out every day between all humans, animals, and insects. 60% of people with bipolar disorder are unemployed. 39% of the world's population is overweight, and that number is only getting bigger. You are 5x more likely to get struck by lightning than be 7 foot tall. There are more combinations in a 52 deck of cards than stars in the known universe. Every time you shuffle a deck of cards, chances are that you have put them in an order that has never been seen in the history of the universe. Men are about 7 times more successful at suicide than women. I work in an emergency call center and spent some time answering 999 calls. I was surprised that all the threatening or attempting suicide calls were women, as I know men are more likely to kill themselves statistically. I mentioned this to an experienced call handler and she said women threaten it and men just go off on their own and do it. When you get an attempted suicide and they are not breathing, it's the man. For the people on the internet determined to call out every statement that isn't 100% literally true, obviously this is a generalization. Statistics show that men have about a 1 in 2 chance of developing cancer during their lifetime, while women have a 1 in 3 chance. That's effing terrifying. How you are more likely to die in your bathtub than a roller coaster. You are more likely to die from falling coconuts than shark attacks in the US. A fire will double in volume every 14 seconds given unlimited fuel. In the US, you are more likely to be killed by a cow than you are to be killed by a coyote. 1 in 7 Americans receives food from food banks or similar sources. 1 in 4 American kids don't reliably know where their next meal is coming from. According to the FBI, there are currently more than 25 active serial killers in the US. The U.S. government has misplaced 6 thermonuclear warheads. They were either lost or stolen in transit, and at this juncture, one of the largest nuclear superpowers in the world has no idea where they are. Broccoli has more protein per calorie than a steak. Note, per calorie. Before anyone replaces their steak with broccoli, just know that steak proteins are complete and broccolis aren't. 80% of suicides are men. American military kill-to-death ratio is 1500 to 1. That you can fit all the planets in our solar system between the Earth and the Moon and still have some room spare. Mind blown. In 2004, the average MLB strikeout rate was 17.3%, and the average home run rate was 2.8%. That same year, Barry Bonds hit 45 home runs and struck out just 41 times. He had more home runs than strikeouts. Insane. The average person produces about 46.5 liters of saliva each month. 20% of produce and fruit in the USA is never sold and is left to rot. 86% of British people live within 8 miles from where they were born. There are approximately 78,000,000,000 atoms in a grain of sand. That herpes, especially oral, is so common 67% of the world's population is infected and 12% have genital herpes, but thankfully there's a scientist working on a cure for these 2 herpes viruses with gene editing, meaning a cure is very likely in the near future. There are 14 dead people per living person on Earth. You actually lose money when you put it in savings accounts because the APY, annual percentage yield, does not match inflation of the dollar. To put it simply, you put $100 into a savings account on January 1st, 2020 with the national average APY of 0.05% and leave it for 1 year. Your interest will have gained you 5 cents. In that same year, the US dollar inflated, lost buying power by 1.23%. It may appear as if you had a gain as your balance shows 100.05. However, that amount now has the same buying power as 98.82 1 year ago. So what should we be doing? Investing any non-emergency savings in low-fee ETFs. The age of the independent investor is upon us. Once you save 3 to 6 months expenses and maybe whatever your health insurance deductible is, if American, it makes a lot more sense to contribute more to an employer-sponsored investment account or an individual Roth IRA. Between inflation hedging and tax breaks, you make an insanely larger amount of money than stuffing it into a savings account. You are more likely to die at a gender reveal party than a shark attack. The United States, land of the free, incarcerates more citizens per capita than any other country. US. 629 inmates per 100,000 citizens, compared to other countries. Cuba. 510. Brazil. 381. Russia. 326. China, about 250. Mexico. 169. UK. 131. France. 100. And then literally used for slave labor. Makes me laugh when they bang on about how free they are. That Arabs traded twice as many African slaves compared to transatlantic trade, and in conditions that were far more effed up in every damn way. Bugs me when people act like slavery is an American problem. I look at our history here as someone who isn't, and the history of everywhere else. Slavery was a global problem. It's everybody's problem and it's everybody that has to fix it. Can't push all the blame onto one person and pretend the rest of us are innocent. If you were to compress Earth's existence into a 24-hour day, life would first appear at 4 AM. Plants would first appear at 10 PM. Dinosaurs from about 11 PM to 11:40 PM. And humans emerge at 11:59 PM. From Bill Bryson's A Short History of Nearly Everything. In America, evangelical Christians make up less than 11% of the population, but account for almost 30% of all voters. The vast majority of Republicans and Democrats are close to the middle on most issues, but the conservative minority is better at showing up for election day than any other demographic. Presidential elections typically have around 60% of eligible Americans vote. The most recent was more like 67%. If evangelical Christians were only 11% of the population, and 100% of them voted, they'd still just be 11 over 60 equals 18% of voters. Your statistics are a mathematical impossibility. In 2019, before the pandemic, 44% of Americans made less than $18K a year. That's 54 million working Americans. Yet the household income what includes the 1% was $68,700. If you take out the top 5%, people earning just under $400K a year, that average falls just under $30K per household, which can have any number of wage earners. Households include roommates, working adult children, etc. Then 20 million people lost their jobs. Way more than half of people in the US earn so little that it's a wonder they survive at all. COVID has claimed more American lives than all wars in the 20th and 21st century combined. Yet you don't want to wear masks and distrust vaccines. That's crazy. We are closer in time to the birth of Cleopatra than she was to the construction of the Great Pyramid. Do you feel unsafe, or like the world is an increasingly dangerous place, locally and or internationally? You're wrong. The world today is the safest it has ever been from violent crime, war, and it only continues to get better. 90% of child sexual abuse victims know their attacker. 20% of all sexual abuse victims are under the age of 8. A typical pedophile will commit 117 sexual crimes in a lifetime. Children living in foster care are 10x more likely to be sexually abused. Survivors are 10 to 13 times more likely to attempt suicide. There is more actual lemon in lemon pledge cleaner than there is in country time lemonade.